Welcome to BBOC Live. This is the week 4 edition of our 3 and Out, and we go for it. So we have a fourth down, talking about our favorite bet of the weekend. We will get to Friday Night Lights, our favorite overdogs, aka favorites, our underdog moneyline parlay, and then mention our favorite bets. This is part of our weekly full breakdown of the entire Saturday slate, which will be out later tonight. If you're watching on YouTube, welcome to our new BBOC channel. Make sure you hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, really helps us out. Colin, let's dive right into some Friday Night Lights on first down. All right, let's start with Stanford, Syracuse, two teams coming off of a bye. Stanford, I think, sitting at around an 8.5-point favorite here. Total 57.5. I was originally a little interested in Stanford. I was hoping to get over 10. Didn't come. Some Stanford money came in. I think it might be a position I'll be able to get live. This game should be back and forth. I do have some concerns about Stanford. I do think the bye week favors their staff over the Syracuse staff, which is kind of green as far as, X's and O's and adjustments. But the Stanford offensive line, still an issue. I don't think they'll have much of a run game outside of potentially Daniels' legs. But the Syracuse defense, if you look at some of the underlying metrics, they do have issues. They are a bit vulnerable. So I think there's some paths to points here for Stanford, but the offensive line still is a concern. The secondary really does concern me against this explosive Syracuse passing attack. Kyle McCord has been on fire through 2 games. He has weapons all around him, just explosive weapons. There's a lot of talent on that Syracuse offense. What do you see here in this ACC battle? Feels weird to say. Stanford traveling across country to Syracuse.
Yeah, well, Stanford hanging around dead numbers on a Friday night and might touch 10, and you and I are going to try to grab it. This sounds exactly like the opener for the Trees against TCU. It's the exact same market movement, and I can't disagree. I mean, I think I make this Syracuse minus 9.5. I think SP Plus is around 7.5 on this game. So really, it's 7, you're going to get a ton of Syracuse, 10, you're going to get a lot of Stanford. I think the one thing I keep coming back to stuck in this game is that Syracuse has had severe struggles with mobile quarterbacks. You look at Parker Navarro at Ohio, Haynes King at Georgia Tech. They just had their way. And that was a big handicap that we have with Stanford against TCU is Ashton Daniels this year. He's already got 150 rushing yards, split evenly between scrambles and design calls. And is the Syracuse defense going to be able to handle Alec Ayomaner? And Syracuse struggles with EPA. They have a defensive EPA rank of 113th against a rush, 73rd against a pass. So there's an avenue for Stanford, for Troy Taylor to have some of these quick strikes, some of these trick plays, all of that bag that he has, because he doesn't have success rate, because he doesn't have a lot of good numbers. The Stanford advanced analytics is like a beautiful car wreck. It's just kind of gross. And you're right, this Syracuse offense, I think they're going to get better every week with Kyle McCord. He's up to 8 touchdowns already. And, Syracuse is outside the top 100 in rushing success rate, but they're 6th in passing success rate. So it's what they do downfield through the air that's really got them going. And they're 59% of the time they're passing the ball. And they should be able to do this against Stanford. They're outside the top 100 in defensive pass success rate. Their coverage numbers are 110th. They're on target allowed. This one I love. You guys know I love on target. That is, does your wide receiver catch it in stride and keep moving? Well, Stanford defensively, if you include FCS numbers, they're 163rd. That is terrible. That tells me Kyle McCord's going to go berserk. I want the over in this number. Now, the keys in this range, Stuck, are 55 and 59, 2 of the biggest keys in totals. We're just kind of floating in a dead spot, maybe 56.5. I've seen a little dip on this. I think if you're seeing a 55.5, you might want to go ahead and just pay an extra 10 cents and get that 55. But I really like the over here. I see no resistance to Kyle McCord. I don't like Syracuse's ability to stop a mobile quarterback with Ashton Daniels.
Yeah, and you mentioned Parker Navarro and that Ohio offense. I mean, Tyus ran for 200 on 16 carries. That Ohio offense last week at home against Morgan State, they only scored 21 points. Parker Navarro, they couldn't run the ball. Parker Navarro threw 3 picks in the second quarter. and I think he got pulled in that game. So
And a
wasn't the
backdoor
best.
cover,
Yeah,
backdoor cover too.
wasn't the best look for that Syracuse defense. But yeah, should be points in this one. I might just look to get a better number live on Stanford because looking back at that TCU game, like TCU really was able to do whatever it wanted when it dropped back to throw. And there's no reason to think that that won't be the case once again with Syracuse. Yes, Stanford returns a ton of production on the back end, but it was bad last year. Returning production doesn't necessarily equate to improved production. But let's move on to the late night game. We'll cover Nebraska, Illinois in just a moment in another segment. But let's talk a little San Jose State, Washington State on the Palouse. Both of these teams are 3-0, both straight up and against the spread. This is a tricky handicap. For what it's worth, the San Jose State quarterback, your guy, Dr. Brown, he's coming back to Pullman. He was at Washington State. Now he's at San Jose State. Why is this a tricky handicap? Well, Washington State, number one, it's a short week, coming off of a huge win. Rivalry game win, emotional, close game against Washington. Now short week against San Jose State. Is there a little bit of an emotional letdown? And then on the other side, who is San Jose State? They have played who they play in the opener? Sac State. And that game could have went either way, all the way until the end. There was some turnovers, a quarterback injury, and then there was a misleading final score. But they played an FCS school. They played Air Force, who is dreadful this year. Brand new team. They are the worst version of Air Force we've seen in quite some time. And then they played Kennesaw State, the worst team in FBS. The one thing we do know, so it's hard to gauge like how good it actually is San Jose State. They've played 3 clowns. Now, to their credit, they did cover all 3. Really a fairly lucky cover against Kennesaw State, but they were the much better team in that game. The one thing we do know is maybe I'll just bet some Nick Nash props. Nick Nash is a baller. I bet Kennesaw State last week, and I said, look, they're going to cover this number as long as they just cover Nick Nash. They couldn't do it, or did they not prep for the game? Because he had 17 catches for 225 yards and 3 touchdowns. Against Air Force, 7 for 90 and a touchdown. Against Sac State, 10 for 170 and 2 touchdowns. This kid's got 500 yards receiving in 3 games and 6 touchdowns. Nick, should we get our Nick Nash Heisman future tickets? Is he even listed out there? I mean, he's basically their entire offense. But tough spot for Washington State. Tough to really gauge how good San Jose State is because their schedule has been just hilariously easy. What do you see here?
Yeah, you're right about the spot for Washington State. I mean, you come off the Apple Cup, a big win, and not only is it kind of a hangover from beating Oregon, they've got Boise State on the road next week. So I'm not really sure that they're going to spend any time putting in that game plan, but still it's on deck and it's a big game. So how serious are you taking San Jose State? This number, again, we're in a dead spot here, right? As we're recording this, we're at 12. This is a number I've desperately wanted to get to 13 and a half so I can take some San Jose State. Again, at 10, it would take a lot of money from Washington State. So that's how the market's going to react. But, you look at this, Washington State has been nothing but a big play machine. They're 4th in rush EPA and 16th in pass EPA. The success rate is outside the top 70, and they're 93rd in third down conversions. Washington State cannot consistently move the chains. They can't put together methodical drives. They just rely on the big play. And John Materin at quarterback, he hasn't generated a big-time throw against Texas Tech and Washington. So, he did record 3 turnover-worthy plays in those 2 games. So his ADOT has spiked from 8.3 to 11.3 from last year to this year. So that shows you the nature of this Washington State offense, that they're throwing deep. It was limited attempts last year, but there is an obvious thing for the Washington State offense to take deeper shots and not rely on moving the chains. And Mateer finally came back to earth, with the zone read game with Wayshawn Parker against Washington. They're both still averaging over 5.3 yards after contact, but I don't think that's fair with some of the other competition that they've played. Now, you've already mentioned Nick Nash's name. That's the entire handicap on this side of the ball. Can Washington State stop Nick Nash when he lines up in the slot or wherever, if he's in orbit, whatever he's doing. And he spends all of his snaps in the slot on the right side. He has 6 touchdowns. He averages 4.33 yards per route run. That is an insane number. That's double what we expect for explosives. That's double, and he's doing that out of the slot. But one item that you have to know about Wazoo is they can defend the pass. They're 24th in coverage. They're 10th in on target allowed, but this is a slot player. It's not like, I mean, we're getting rid of the ball extremely fast. We're doing crossers. We're doing all kinds of things quick. And I think the big important part is that Washington State is 128th defensively in tackling. What does that mean? Nick Nash is going to get the ball fast, whether that's behind the line of scrimmage or it's on a quick slant. I expect him to look like a pinball bumper machine, just banging into all of the Washington State defenders because they can't tackle whatsoever. So again, this is another game where I lean to the over. I don't see resistance going against the Washington State explosives that are coming, the Nick Nash pinball that is coming. I would look at Wazoo if we got down to 10, but really I do want San Jose State if we can get up to 13. So that I'll probably play that live, but the total, I'm absolutely probably going to get involved on the over.
All right, let's move on to second down, our favorite overdog of the week, aka our favorite. I'm gonna go with Texas Tech here. A little bit of that going against the market here, and everyone's favorite darling Arizona State this year is 3-0, 3-0 against the spread. Texas Tech struggled their first 2 weeks, but can we let's connect some of the dots here. Arizona State, number one, they beat Wyoming in the opener. Have you watched Wyoming? Wyoming lost at home to an FCS team, hasn't come close to covering in either game. They're bad. They beat Mississippi State by 1 possession at home. We're outplayed in the second half in that game, got a defensive touchdown. This is a team that has, I think, 3 defensive touchdowns. They're plus 6 or 7 in turnovers already. Have you seen Mississippi State? They just got drilled at home by Toledo, the team that got outplayed by UMass the week before. And then they beat Texas State, but I thought they were outplayed in that game. Big penalty flipped that game. They're down 2 touchdowns. They closed the 3-point underdog at Texas State. Now they're closing it. You're at 2.5, 3-point underdog at Texas Tech. Come on. I have Texas Tech a touchdown better than Texas State. Texas Tech, meanwhile, their first game, they almost lose to Abilene Christian. Wasn't a good look. Second game, they lose to Washington State, but they had a ton of injuries. I think 6 or 7 of the 8 fourth downs went against them. That's going to be every Texas Tech game. So the one thing I hate about this game, I hate laying over 3 with Texas Tech because there's going to be 4th down variants. They're going to go for it a ton. They didn't get any of the 4th downs. Washington State got theirs in that game. They actually outgained Washington State. They were -3 in turnovers, and they had a ton of injuries. They even lost 4 starters during the game. And so, but a misleading final score. Last week, they get healthier. Taj Brooks, their star running back, returns, and it was their most dominant effort of the year, and they blow out North Texas. Think they should be getting a bit healthier across the board. They've had a ton of injuries, but Baron Morton looked great. He finally looks healthy. I'm not fully sold on this Arizona State secondary. They've been pretty fortunate. I think they're overvalued in the market. You look at who they beat and what those teams have done in the other games, and then add on top of that, they've been pretty fortunate with turnovers and defensive touchdowns, even their 4th down conversions. I am a bit worried about Sam Levitt's legs and Scatabo. It's Texas Tech let Mateer for Washington State run for 200. Focus all week has been pass rush with contain. They do have good linebackers. I don't know. I think this is too cheap for Texas Tech, who's been, I believe, let me double check my numbers here. Texas Tech has been, over the past 10 years, are the most profitable home favorite in FBS. So conference opener here at home, pretty good home field advantage. I like Morton and company to get it done. Do you have any thoughts there? And where's your favorite overdog?
I wouldn't get in front of Texas Tech right now. I watched that game in full, had a bet on them last week against North Texas. It was a defensive and offensive masterpiece. They dominated the Mean Green. I would not get in the way. Arizona State,
hopefully
I think,
they, like Lux in basketball, I think they're going to play, but those are like their 2 best players. They're questionable, but so there are some injuries to monitor. But yeah, I like Tech here. Where are you going for your favorite overdog?
I'm going to go, we're going to shift back to Friday Night Lights. I really love Nebraska here against Illinois. I know you can't put it in a stat sheet, but I believe one of these teams is much more blue collar and tougher than the other. And the team that's tougher is going to be Nebraska. So Bielema talked this week about the commitment that he needs to have against the run, when facing Nebraska. And I can see why he thinks that angle, because Corn really hasn't played anybody that's kind of run against him. UTEP running attack? No. Colorado doesn't even have one, and Northern Iowa is an FCS program. Granted, they're not bad, but it's not really what we're looking for here as far as a data point. The problem is that the Illinois rush has been great at getting 2 yards in stuff rate attempts, 15th in stuff rate. Everything else is absolutely terrible. 91st in rushing success rate, 56th in line yards. Just the offensive line is not moving the pile. Specifically Caden Fegan, Khalil Valentine, just nothing. After they get touched, they're going down. I mean, both of them are below 3 yards after contact. They're just not creating anything more for themselves. Now, Luke Altmaier has been good. He's had to be good. He's like really the only offensive option for Illinois. But when Bielema comes out and says that we want to run in this game, that really kind of affects how often Luke Altmaier is going to throw. So they're going to try to grind it out and get in a punching match with Nebraska. And I don't think that's a very good thing to do. So, there's a massive havoc advantage here for Nebraska also. They're already 17th up in defensive havoc. Illinois, I mean, you look at the teams that they played, specifically Kansas, who won at the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball, which I didn't expect. I mean, I know Illinois won that game, but Kansas really kind of gave it to them. Well, right now, Illinois
in the final minute of the first half flipped that game.
Yeah, Illinois' offense is 101st in havoc allowed. I mean, Nebraska should dominate on the defensive side. And then that advantage does not exist for Illinois on their defensive side of the ball. Right now, the Cornhuskers are top 30 in havoc allowed. They've been protecting Dylan Raiola. They're producing quality drives, 33rd in the nation, getting methodicals to go down, move the chains, get into scoring position. And Raiola is 5-1 TD to INT right now, just a single turnover-worthy play that came in 32 dropbacks against Colorado. No shame in that. There's a pretty good player in their secondary. I just think, the number is not bad. I mean, it's a number that I have right around where it's sitting at. There is just a massive difference here in which team can actually establish the rush, which team can actually own the trench. That team is Nebraska. So give me them all the way. As far as a price is concerned, though, if this dips down around 7.5, I think earlier today there was a 7.5 minus 105 that I bought down to 7 at minus 115. So just be conscious of the price. You go to overtime, you're definitely wanting to sit on 7.5 and not 8 if you ever played that Oklahoma State Arkansas game.
Yeah, I do think Nebraska has a big edge in the trenches on both sides of the ball, which should be the difference here. Mm-hmm. Illinois has some talented backs, but they haven't been able to get the run game going. The Illinois offense is a little better than I thought. Altmaier's played decent. Yeah. Getting Zachary Franklin at receiver was big. Match him with Bryant. In their RPO game, they're going to just spam those guys over the middle of the field. But, they should have lost to Kansas. They had Central Michigan played them dead even in the first half. They have a kid come on for his first career field goal attempt outdoors in Illinois, make a 60-yard field goal, and then they add on a touchdown late after a Central Michigan failed onside kick. So that game was actually pretty close. So I think the best data point of any of these teams has been what Nebraska did against Colorado. So let's go Corn. All right, let's move on to third down, and it's our underdog moneyline parlay, our favorite moneyline underdogs of the week. I'm going to go with ECU. I'm going to go with the Pirates. This look, ECU, high variance team. They're pretty wild on offense. They go fast. They keep turning it over. So maybe there's some regression there. This is one of the most improved teams in the country. Should have beat App State last week. They led 17-0 in that game. But, they at least have a pulse on offense now. The defense is still really good. But this is also mainly a fate of Liberty. Liberty has been extremely disappointing. And the opening week game, they haven't covered yet. They were in it with Campbell in the fourth quarter at home. At New Mexico State, should have lost that game. Had to make a crazy comeback late. New Mexico State just went for it on fourth down. And then against UTEP, through 3 quarters, the game was pretty even. Why has Liberty looked so much worse this year? Injuries, it's a lot of it. They've had injuries on offensive line, defensive tackle, cornerback, wide receiver. They really missed Daniels at wide receiver. And now it doesn't look like Cooley, their running back, is going to play. He's the heartbeat of that offense. And he's kind of the engine that makes that car run. Maybe he plays. He's listed as day-to-day. Chadwell didn't seem optimistic about it earlier in the week. Then he said maybe he'll play him with load management. So he's not going to be at 100%. So higher variance game here. ECU due for some potential turnover luck. And this Liberty team is down. They're not the same team, and they're dealing with a ton of injuries. which has really hurt them. I think they're ripe to get picked off here. I also like ECU against the spread. And the good thing about ECU against the spread is that if Liberty's up 3 and they're at the 1 yard line, they're going to take knees. Because last week they were laying 23.5. They were up 18 at the 1 against UTEP with a minute to go. Up 18. UTEP's coach is calling timeouts down 18. The other team at the 1 with a minute to go. Liberty still. Chadwell said his coaches were telling him, punch it in, punch it in. And he said, nope. In the presser after, I'll send a clip to our producer for the podcast. He said, nope, I'm always going to kneel in that situation, no matter what the bookies want us to do. That's what he said. So you have to keep that in mind if you're ever fading or backing Liberty as a big favorite. But give me ECU here. Any thoughts there, and where are you going?
The anti-Neil Brown James Franklin game right there, right? Amazing. Knees and timeouts. Yeah, Kiffin too. No, I love that game. There was some ECU preseason to make the playoffs, some huge numbers out there. This was a game that they had to have, and it was a game that I was willing to let ride for some of those tickets. So completely agree with you. And Liberty is due to be picked off. And if you don't get it here,
if ECU just won that game like they should have last week, they would have been really interesting.
Well, this would have been probably a shorter spread. But I will say this, if we don't get that money line home, we're probably going to be picking off Liberty every week until it happens. They're due. I am going to go with the very first bet that I made this week on Sunday when lines came out. It was Rutgers plus 5.5. It's down to 3.5. I don't need the 3.5. I like Rutgers on the money line here, taking on Virginia Tech. Listen, this Greg Schiano team has an identity every single year, and that is they do not make offensive mistakes. Right now, they are number 1 in the nation in havoc allowed, which means they don't allow tackles for loss. They don't have fumbles. They don't throw interceptions. And you say, well, this has been a pretty soft schedule so far to date. I do trust Rutgers because they are consistently top 10 in havoc allowed every single year. It's just the way that they play. And turns out that's the only thing that the Virginia Tech defense has right now is defensive havoc that's going for them. They're outside the top 50 in rush pass success rate. They're outside the top 100 in tackling. I think we saw a lot of those things in that Vanderbilt win. The one aspect the Hokies can produce is havoc at a rank of 19th. Well, that's not going to work when it gets negated and taken away by Rutgers here. You enter in that Rutgers offense. I just love what they're doing. They're just very solid what they do. They don't make any mistakes. And then when you look at Rutgers coming off of a bye here, Schiano knows what to do with time off. And I'm not talking about going to bowls and dominating teams from the South. I'm talking he is 17-8-1 against the spread when he gets extra time off, when he comes off of bye weeks. This is a great situational spot here against Virginia Tech because who do they play next? The Hokies have a short week, 6 days to get prepared for an ACC Titanic matchup against Miami, Florida. This is a great spot for Rutgers. Let's go get it outright with the most solid, disciplined offense that's in college football right now with Rutgers.
Yeah, Nevada Tech also has a ton of injuries. Left tackle, Tootin even at running back, Jennings at receiver. Someone that their linebacker room's beat up. The linebacker room's not very good. Their run D, you know what Rutgers is going to do. They're going to run it. You hand it to Monungai. Nevada Tech run D has been horrendous. I think they're like 88th in EPA per rush allowed. And what's really concerning is last week against Old Dominion, and Virginia Tech finally covered a game. Old Dominion started a backup quarterback, right? The guy who can't throw. You know how many passing yards? And you knew Old Dominion wasn't going to be able to throw the ball against that Tech secondary with a backup. I think it was a freshman. I forget his name. It was like they had 2 freshmen playing, like Quinn. It's not Heineke. It's something like that. And Colton Joseph. They didn't throw the ball. They threw for like 30 yards. You know what Old Dominion did? A team that can't run the ball, the bad offensive line, they ran it 39 times for 250 yards against Tech. That Tech run D is an issue. The linebacker play is bad. So that's what Rutgers is going to do. Keep this game neutral state, pound the rock. And Tech has just not been that impressive.
Yep.
I'm going to go. So we're going ECU, Rutgers, underdog, money on parlay. Like this one. Let's get it home. Before we get out of here, let's go for it. 4th down, favorite bet of the weekend. Short and sweet for me. Louisiana. Let's go with the Raging Cajuns at home. This is the best situational spot on the board, and I show value in the number. Tulane off back-to-back brutal games against Kansas State and Oklahoma, games that were competitive, exhausting. Meanwhile, and now you're going on the road again to play Louisiana, who's coming off a bye after playing 2 cupcakes, should be much more well rested. This is just a great spot. Tulane also now 1-2. It's like we wanted to get one of those games for our playoff chances. They got USF on deck. There's a lot of familiarity between these coaches because Summerall used to be at Troy. I think he's the better coach, but Louisiana's that extra time to prepare here. This is just a brutal spot. Give me the Raging Cajuns. I think you agree there, right?
Oh, I wrote this up for action beginning of the week. Was able to get 3.5, but that thing, if you're listening to this and you read this, try to go get a 3, because I saw 2.5 start popping on the market before we got here. But I think they went outright. I mean, there's a lot of advantages here. There's a full write-up at Action Network for everybody to go see Louisiana against Tulane. I'm going to pivot over to one of the biggest games of the week. I'm going to take an under inside of Utah and Oklahoma State. Now, if you want, go to listen to the BBOC podcast. I will give you a full breakdown of what's going on with this line. I know exactly where this line started, why it moved, why it came back. But let's just say, if you need to know what's going on with Cam Rising, nobody knows what's going on with Cam Rising. I can promise you that, because the decision whether he's going to play this game is going to be made.
Now, I'm going to stop you there. Teaser. We're going to tease the pod.
We're going to tease the pod.
So, yeah, podcast will be out later tonight. We'll break down that game in full. Tennessee, Oklahoma, Michigan, USC, and then about 20 to 25 other games.
Yeah, perfect. So I'm going to take the under here. I mean, there's a lot of other reasons besides Cam Rising, right? If he plays, he doesn't play, it doesn't matter. Utah is one of the slowest offenses.
That's all I had to say. That's all I had to say. We're teasing the pod.
All right, we'll tease the pod. Under Oklahoma State and Utah.
Yep, we're about to go record the rest right now. Thanks for tuning in. Again, hit that subscribe, like button. Good luck this weekend. Make sure you check out the podcast out later tonight. Live show, 10:30 a.m. Eastern on this YouTube channel and on the Action Network app. Catch y'all then. Cheers.